The year was 1890, and Tennessee Ridge was the kind of place that lived and breathed quiet. A single dirt road wound through the town, past the blacksmith, the general store, and finally to the tallest structure around, St. Augustine's Church. Its white paint had already begun to peel, but its bell still gleamed in the morning sun. Life here moved slow, too slow for the young, but just right for the old. The townsfolk rose with the dawn, worked the soil, and ended their days on porches, letting the crickets sing them to sleep. When word spread that a traveling choir would visit for the church's dedication service, something stirred in people's hearts. They hadn't had music in years, not since the mine accident that took half their joy with it. By the end of the week, banners were hung, pies baked, and children practiced curtsies they'd forget mid-performance. The Ridge was ready for song again. Leading the choir was Clara Holt, a woman in her late 20s, slender, with chestnut hair always tied in a ribbon. She carried herself with quiet dignity, humble but radiant, her voice capable of silencing even the harshest critics. Clara had been orphaned young. Her only family, her little brother, Samuel, had gone missing during the war. All she had left of him was a silver locket she wore close to her heart. Inside, a faded photograph and a few words. "Keep singing. I'll find you again." To Clara, singing wasn't performance, it was prayer, and she believed every note reached heaven, carrying her love to those she lost. The choir, 12 in all, traveled from town to town, singing hymns and folk tunes to raise money for poor churches. Tennessee Ridge was their final stop before heading home. None knew it would be their last. Saturday evening was filled with laughter. The townsfolk shared food and stories. Children played tag around the churchyard while the choir rehearsed inside. Their harmonies floated through the open windows, mingling with the scent of rain in the air. Inside, Pastor Elias Booker, a middle-aged man with gentle eyes and worn hands, watched proudly. "You've brought life back to this place," he told Clara. She smiled. "We only lend the voice, Pastor." The faith was already here, but as the night deepened, thunder rolled over the ridge. The sky darkened like a curtain being drawn. Elias frowned. The storm was moving fast, and the old church had never faced rain this heavy. By midnight, lightning flashed across the hills. The choir huddled inside, lanterns flickering. The caretaker, Martha Keene, swore she heard whispers in the cellar. "The ridge keeps its ghosts," she muttered, but nobody listened. When morning came, the rain had stopped. The sun shone weakly through thinning clouds, but the church was silent. Pastor Elias arrived early, his boots squelching in the mud. He pushed open the heavy door. Inside, lanterns still burned low, their wax dripped dry. Hymn books lay open, chairs scattered, as if people had risen mid-song. No one was there. Clara's silver locket hung from a nail near the altar. The piano bench was overturned. The storm had ended, but something darker lingered. A silence so thick it felt alive. The Ridge searched for 3 days. They combed the woods, checked the river, even sent men into the old mining shafts. There was no trace of the 12 singers, not a footprint, not a scream. Only the faint smell of candle wax and damp earth. Rumors began like weeds. Some said the choir had run off, taking church donations with them. Others whispered of foul play, that Pastor Elias had quarreled with Clara, jealous of her influence. Elias denied it, but the guilt in his eyes betrayed something deeper. "I tried to save them," he muttered once to Martha, who found him praying long past midnight. "I tried." The Ridge grew bitter. Attendance fell. And as years passed, St. Augustine's became a symbol of grief, a monument to unanswered questions. Decades rolled by like slow rain. The church rotted quietly. Ivy climbed its walls, and the bell ropes snapped in a storm. Elias grew old and gray, haunted by memories he couldn't speak of. Children dared one another to press their ears against the church door on moonless nights. Some ran screaming after hearing faint voices, soft, layered harmonies that drifted through the cracks in the floorboards. By the time Elias died, no one entered the church willingly. It was said he was buried clutching his Bible and a small rusted key. In 1923, a young preacher named Jonathan Reeves arrived from Nashville. He was 27, idealistic, and unafraid of ghosts. He believed the ridge could still be saved and the church restored. The townsfolk watched skeptically as he scrubbed walls, patched windows, and cleaned pews long abandoned. "The Lord's house don't like to be forgotten," he said with a grin. One afternoon, as he swept near the altar, his broom hit a soft spot in the floor, a hollow echo. He knelt and knocked again, thud, thud, hollow. That night, Jonathan returned with a lantern and a crowbar. He worked quietly, peeling away the warped planks until the earth beneath gaped open. The smell hit him, old, metallic, and wrong. He shone the light downward. There, beneath the church floor, lay rows of wooden boxes, coffins, some crushed, others intact. He lifted a lid. Inside lay a skeleton, still clutching sheet music. Another, a woman's bones, delicate, her fingers wrapped around a silver locket. Jonathan's knees gave out. "Dear God," he whispered, "what happened here?" The locket opened easily. Inside, the same faded photograph, a boy smiling faintly, and a folded scrap of paper. The ink was smudged but legible. "To my brother Samuel, when I sing, I carry you with me. If I don't return, forgive them. Forgive us all." Jonathan's throat tightened. He brought the note to the light, reading it again and again. The choir hadn't vanished. They'd been here the whole time, beneath the very floor they sang upon. Digging through the church's old desk, Jonathan found a cracked leather journal, Pastor Elias Booker's. The final pages were uneven, his handwriting frantic. The storm was worse than any before. "I feared the roof would give. I led them to the cellar for safety, locked the door, too tight. Mud came through the cracks. The air grew thin. I dug. I prayed. I shouted their names, but the storm drowned every sound. When it ended, silence. I buried them beneath the altar. The Lord's house will keep them, but my soul will never rest." Jonathan closed the book, trembling. Elias hadn't murdered them. He'd tried to save them, and failed. The next morning, Jonathan called the townsfolk. "Come see," he said. "Come face what's been buried too long." They gathered in silence as he read Elias's journal aloud. Men removed their hats. Women wept quietly. For the first time, the ridge understood. The ghosts that haunted their nights were not vengeful. They were waiting to be remembered. Old Martha Keene, frail and half-blind, leaned on her cane. "I told you," she whispered, "the ridge keeps its ghosts." But maybe they weren't haunting us. Maybe they were praying for us. That night, the people of Tennessee Ridge filled the church once more. They prayed for the lost 12, for Clara Holt, for Pastor Elias, and for every voice that never found peace. As Jonathan led the prayer, a soft breeze moved through the rafters. It sounded like a sigh, or the faint echo of a hymn. Days later, the coffins were carried gently to the churchyard. Candles lined the path. Children placed wildflowers on each grave. As Jonathan read the final verse of "Abide with Me," a soft harmony joined in. 12 voices, clear and distant, carried on the wind. The people wept openly. Even the toughest men dropped to their knees. They knew then that the ridge's ghosts had finally found rest. When Jonathan returned to the church the next day, a single sheet of music lay on the altar. The title read, Mercy in the Storm. He had never seen it before, yet as he hummed the melody, it felt familiar, like something passed down through the wind. That Sunday, the congregation sang it together. At the final note, the rusted bell above them rang on its own, echoing across the valley. Weeks later, a gray-haired traveler limped into town. He introduced himself as Samuel Holt. "I'm looking for my sister," he told Jonathan, voice trembling. Her name was Clara. She led a choir once Jonathan's heart ached. He placed the silver locket in the old man's hands. Samuel's eyes filled with tears. "She always promised I'd hear her sing again," he whispered. "And now I have." Samuel stayed in the ridge, teaching children to sing. The church was alive again. The new choir, farmers, kids, widows, and miners, sang every Sunday, beginning each service with Mercy in the Storm. Every time they reached the last line, the old bell chimed, perfectly in tune. One evening, as the sun set crimson behind the hills, Jonathan wrote in his own journal, "Pastor Elias feared the storm and made a mistake that cost 12 lives, but in that same fear he revealed something eternal, that forgiveness outlives tragedy. We are all capable of burying truth out of fear. It takes courage to dig it back up." His sermon that Sunday was simple. Sin is not always wickedness. Sometimes it's just fear. But forgiveness, that's the real song of God. By the 1930s, Tennessee Ridge was known across counties for its choir. Travelers came from miles away to hear the voices that once vanished beneath the church. The town, once haunted, now thrived. And on the church wall, a bronze plaque read, "To the voices beneath, you were never lost. You were waiting to be heard again." When Jonathan was an old man, he dreamed of the church one last time. In his dream, the pews were full, not with the living, but with the 12 singers, radiant and smiling. Clara stepped forward, her silver locket shining softly. "Thank you," she said. "You gave us rest. Now sing for those still lost." When Jonathan woke, the bell outside was ringing. Slow, deep, and beautiful. At Jonathan's funeral, the townsfolk gathered once more. Samuel, frail and tearful, led the choir through Clara's song. As they reached the final verse, sunlight broke through the stained glass, spilling gold across the altar. A gentle wind swept through, lifting the candle's flames. For a moment, 12 faint silhouettes appeared behind the choir, smiling, peaceful. Then, like music fading into the hills, they were gone. The ridge had learned that even the deepest sorrow could become a hymn, if sung with forgiveness. And somewhere beyond the hills, the voices of the lost still rose with the dawn, carrying a single promise through the wind: mercy in the storm.